Dr. KK here. This is Key Dialogues. I'd like to introduce you to our first guest. This is Natalie Patterson, president of Sister Support and also producer of Key Dialogues. We wanted to come together today and just have a frank, kind of casual conversation about hair.
Well, I think hair is this complex thing for women, but specifically African American women or people who identify as African American. It's complicated, right? So I'm a light-skinned, high yellow, black girl with curly hair, that narrative, right? So I grew up with that narrative of never being black enough, but also never being white enough. And so, struggling to be like, okay, so what hair product am I supposed to use? Like, I don't have the straight hair like my white friends, but I don't have the black enough hair like my black homegirls. And so needing to figure out different hair products, which makes me think about stores that carry hair products and how the African American or ethnic hair section is always segregated. And as a young girl, what kind of message that sent to me about my hair, that it had to be somewhere, that it was somewhere else tucked in a small section, that like my shampoo wasn't with the regular whatever shampoos, it had to be on the end cap around the corner, and that kind of thing. So it always definitely sent a negative message and connotation. I'm grateful that now there's this humongous natural hair movement where having big ass curly hair is completely acceptable and really celebrated. Unfortunately, I just didn't grow up in a time period where that was true. I was always called Bisquick, or just add water, like
Bisquick.
Yes,
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, it comes from this idea of Bisquick, the like all you need to do is add water to make pancakes, and so transferring that idea to hair of just if I just add water, my hair is done, which let me just tell you is not the truth. But I can understand within the context of the African American community and among Black girls, I understand where that idea comes from, because we have these ideas of good hair and bad hair and all of that stuff. So I understand it, although of course when my friend was like, girl, you just a Bisquick anyway, of course I was like offended, especially because it was coming from a friend. It's different when, people you don't expect to care about you are talking crap, but when it's people who do love and care about you and then they have some cute nickname that's really a slight, it does feel some type of way. So for sure, this idea of Bisquick didn't really sit well with me, but it's something I've experienced my whole life.
Do you remember having any thoughts about what men are going to perceive?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. It's part of why I stopped straightening my hair, because I realized that white men all of a sudden thought I was beautiful when I straightened my hair. That when I had like big curly, hair in a bun, they wasn't even checking for me. And then also understanding that dark-skinned Black men, if I had big natural curly hair, were definitely checking for me, because there's some validation in a dark-skinned man with a fair skin, Black woman, and like all of those dynamics, none of which I'm comfortable with. And so people who try to fetishize me in that way, I'm just like not interested in generally. But like it absolutely is part of our culture, is this colorism and this value of, how close to white are you and all these things. And like, I didn't find out that there was white in my family until I was 30. So I grew up as a Black girl, like being like, we come in all colors. Like, what are y'all talking about?
Absolutely.
It wasn't a big deal until the outside world was trying to make it something that was more beautiful or less beautiful or whatever, where it just felt gross to me. And so I just stopped being interested in people who hold that as so valuable, because I want to be cared for and loved because of the person that I am, not because I meet your aesthetic desires for you to like social climb. That's weird.
It is weird. And not only is it weird, though, it really presents a very excellent example of hegemony, right? Which is this dominance that is projected onto people with their own consent. So what I hear you saying is that fitting into a Eurocentric standard of beauty can be seen as a valuable aesthetic.
Absolutely. Yeah, the people who are buying into that value system, it absolutely is currency. And I think about, when I was a little girl, my mom worked in the legal field, and she always worked for the most high-powered attorney in Los Angeles, and was like able to navigate those spaces because she's fair with green eyes, and like she could just fit in. And it's like everybody who knew her knew she was black, but to white people, she was white. And so she got further in her career as a result of that. And I think about what that had to create in her to have to, like, she never had pictures of us at her office. Because she was like, I don't want them knowing anything about my life because they're going to use it against me. And so, like, I can either take this money and feed my family, or I can be caught up on that I can't have my pictures here or whatever and be broke. Like, and that's the reality of the choices that she had to make. Feed her family or be honest to people who don't actually give a shit about her anyway.
Was your mother having to make a choice about eating or not as it related to her identity and how people were perceiving her?
Oh, absolutely. And whether she wanted to be as transparent as possible, which absolutely would have created barriers for her. I mean, and even in terms of like where we lived, right? Because people have an expectation of where a secretary is supposed to live in our society. So we lived in a home that my mom bought and owned as a single woman. She bought and owned a home. And her boss didn't live that far from where we lived. And so there was kind of this conversation of make sure he never knows where you live, because if he does, then that's probably going to make him feel some type of way about that he feels like he's so superior and you live a neighborhood over from him. Like, that's not how it's supposed to work. So for sure, there were strategic choices my mom had to make for us to be in good schools, to have access to education and healthy food options and all these things. She absolutely had to make choices about being clear about her identity or being ambiguous and succeeding to the extent that she did.
Which brings me to another kind of, issue, challenge. It doesn't sound to me like your mother identified as a white woman, but she didn't stop people's perception of her.
Well, she just didn't let it mess up her money. Right?
Well, I grew up with a super black mama and a super black daddy, who were also very well educated, and also very much so into social justice and very much so into African culture. And so I can remember when I was a little girl at school with my mom, she was completing her MFA at UCLA, and one of her colleagues took her brush out of her bag and began to brush her hair, her long flowing blonde hair. And I stood there mesmerized until she offered me the brush. And I took the brush and went and began to brush this woman's hair. Now, I can tell you that my mother was livid.
I'm livid, so I hope she was.
She was livid. And I never ever forgot this experience, but I always had to ask myself, what is it that prompted me to take the brush and brush this woman's hair?
But also, what prompted her to hand it to you?
Oh, she did that because she wanted to engage me. She wanted to interact with me. And so in her mind, I should have been attracted to, and I was, her hair. I was. I can't tell a lie. I was. But I have to ask myself, why might I have been attracted to her hair? And how did she know that? What do you think?
I mean, I don't know. I think those kind of like nuanced moments sometimes are really human, and they just are spirit moving. And some other times it's like a microaggression where you like, are you trying to make me brush your hair, lady? Because I'm black, so I gotta brush your hair? Like, is that what's happening? Or is this woman genuinely trying to connect with a kid? And so she's like, I have cool hair. I think where it gets weird is when it's a different race and like, what is that nuanced underlying conversation that's being had and why?
And the nuanced conversation, I think we might be able to clearly guess, has something to do with the embedded and explicit beauty of European or Eurocentric hair that is straighter, silkier in texture, as opposed to, diametrically opposed to, black hair or bad hair. That this idea that good is associated with European aesthetics, beauty aesthetic, really does begin to exclude a greater population of women of color, and not just persons of African descent, many women of color. And so the conversation, the implicit conversation was for me, don't you want my hair? Don't you want to know what it feels like? Don't you want to touch it?
And just also this idea of like entitlement around sharing, right? Like, I think about, as a Black woman, I don't feel entitled always to share what inherently might be beautiful to me, but I understand the positionality of my existence in the larger society. And so I think that that's what you're alluding to, is if white people on this pyramid are placed at the top, then they inherently feel entitled to think that everything they do is amazing and don't you want to be a part of it. And I think about that in terms of women, the work I do with women, and women of color specifically, and how if we're at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of everything, then how often are we asking for what we want or need? How often do we feel, even if on spirit level we feel connected, how often do we feel entitled to verbalize that and to say it into the world, like, I deserve these things, or I want these things, or I'm beautiful, or whatever. Like, we say it as an act of resistance and rebellion versus just like facts.
An act of resistance. So, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud.
Is an act of resistance.
Yes.
Yes, and it's a call to action, and yes, there's beauty in all of this, but it is a resistance song, right? And as a woman of color, that's constantly the position we're in. Is like, I think about myself as like a full-bodied, plus-size person, and I think about that me saying I love my body is like, oh my God, you're so courageous. And it's like, would it be courageous if a skinny person said that? No. We would go like, yeah, because girl, you look amazing, so you should feel that way. But if a person who is othered says that, then we're like, wow, it's so courageous that it's like the woman telling you.
She says, what does it feel to look like you look in a world where that is unacceptable? And so really what you're saying to me is just the audacity of someone to ask someone that about their physicality really says something about their positioning in the society.
And the next step is to think about, like, because everybody, like us and everybody who's watching, we don't always understand our privilege, right? And so the thing that I always encourage us to look at is who is hierarchically, who is beneath us, right? In terms of structure, not actuality, but like in the structure that we live in. Who is beneath us? And so I always think about disabled people, right?
Oh.
But we imply that anyone who is not the standard, it's a miracle, anything that they do. And it's like, no, they just doing them. They're just doing them.
And that's my act of resistance today. What's your act of resistance going to be? This has been Dr. KK. Deuces.